Welcome back, history enthusiasts. Today, we re-exploring one of the most pivotal and tumultuous times in ancient Egyptian history, the civil wars that shaped the First and Second Intermediate periods. From around 2160 to 2040 BCE, this was a time when the great Egyptian empire fractured into chaos and disarray. From the collapse of centralized power to the rise of rival factions, the civil wars during these periods are crucial in understanding the ebb and flow of Egypt's ancient civilization. Before we dive into the civil wars themselves, let's first understand the context. Egypt's Old Kingdom, often referred to as the Age of the Pyramids, saw the country at its height with monumental achievements in architecture, culture, and centralized power. The pharaoh, as the divine ruler, had absolute authority and the state was highly organized. However, by around 2200 BCE, cracks began to appear in this system. By the end of the 6th dynasty c. 2181 BCE, Egypt entered a period of political fragmentation. Long-term droughts, economic problems, and poor leadership contributed to the weakening of central authority. Provincial governors, known as nomarchs, began to gain more power and autonomy, eroding the pharaoh's ability to govern effectively. This decentralization of power led to the collapse of the Old Kingdom and opened the door for the First Intermediate period. The First Intermediate period c. 160 to 055 BCE marked the beginning of Egypt's division into competing regional states. While Memphis, the capital of the Old Kingdom, was left in a state of disarray, provincial rulers, or nomarchs, took control of different regions of the country. The Nile River, once a symbol of unity, became a dividing line between two primary centers of power. The north, led by the Heracleopolitan dynasty, and the south, centered around Thebes. In the north, the Heracleopolitan dynasty established its rule from the city of Heracleopolis, while in the south, Thebes became the stronghold of a competing group of local leaders known as the Theban dynasty. These rival dynasties engaged in a series of political and military conflicts as both sought to control Egypt as a whole. The lack of a central authority resulted in constant warfare, with both sides trying to assert dominance. The First Intermediate period was defined by fragmentation, with different regions and cities vying for supremacy. The rulers of Heracleopolis and Thebes were not just battling each other for power, but also dealing with challenges from lesser nomarchs and local rebellions. As a result, Egypt experienced years of instability, famine, and social upheaval. Amid this chaos, the city of Thebes, located in Upper Egypt, became the focal point of resistance against the Heracleopolitan dynasty in the north. The Theban rulers, who had once been subjugated to northern control, began to consolidate their power. The turning point came with the rise of a powerful leader, Mentuhotep II, who would eventually become the first pharaoh of the 11th dynasty. Mentuhotep II's military genius and diplomatic strategies were instrumental in the reunification of Egypt. By c. 2055 BC, after years of warfare and political maneuvering, Mentuhotep II defeated the Heracleopolitan rulers and their allies. His victory marked the end of the First Intermediate period and the beginning of the Middle Kingdom, a period of reunification and stabilization. Mentuhotep II's victory not only marked the end of a prolonged civil war, but it also laid the foundation for the Middle Kingdom, where Egypt would experience a renaissance in art, culture, and centralized power. The Theban dynasty's victory was a testament to the resilience and persistence of the southern region's rulers during one of the darkest periods in Egyptian history. The First Intermediate period had a lasting impact on Egyptian society. The decentralization of power, although initially a source of division, led to the rise of powerful local leaders who proved capable of re-establishing order when Egypt was finally reunified. The years of conflict left Egypt's people with a profound sense of the need for strong leadership, which was later reflected in the strong centralized authority that characterized the Middle Kingdom. Despite the violence and chaos, the First Intermediate period also brought a change in the way Egyptian society viewed kingship. The concept of Mat, or cosmic order, became even more central to Egyptian governance. The pharaoh was no longer just a divine ruler. He was the symbol of order and stability in a fractured world. Fast forward a few centuries, and Egypt once again finds itself on the brink of collapse. By the 17th dynasty, Egypt entered what we now call the Second Intermediate Period. During this time, a new and foreign power began to emerge in the Delta region, the Hyksos. The Hyksos were a Semitic-speaking people from the Levant who took advantage of Egypt's internal strife and military weaknesses. They conquered the eastern Nile Delta and established their own dynasty, marking a second wave of foreign invasion that fragmented Egypt. Their rule, though initially resented by the native Egyptians, brought new technologies such as the horse-drawn chariot, which would later be adopted by Egyptian forces. Despite their dominance, the Hyksos were eventually overthrown by the native Egyptian rulers of Thebes. Particularly under the leadership of Ahmose I, this marked the end of the Second Intermediate Period and the beginning of the New Kingdom, where Egypt would once again become a dominant empire. The civil wars during Egypt's First and Second Intermediate Periods were more than just conflicts for power. They were defining moments in the history of one of the world's oldest civilizations. From the fragmentation of the Old Kingdom to the foreign invasions of the Second Intermediate Period, Egypt faced existential threats that tested the resilience of its people and their leaders. Ultimately, the lessons learned during these periods would shape Egypt's future. The pharaohs, whether from Thebes or other powerful centers, would come to understand that unity and strong central leadership were paramount in maintaining the legacy of the pharaohs. The First and Second Intermediate Periods remind us that even the greatest civilizations can fall into disarray, but they also show the remarkable capacity for recovery and renewal.